Hello, Excellence family. It's Danny Barnes, Director of Agent Relations. I'm here with Paul Sardone. Paul, how you doing today, man?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Good. Welcome to Title Tuesday, everybody. We're going to do a two-part series. This is the first part because it's a lot of information, but Paul's going to cover a little bit about probate and how to deal with that when you're having a closing or if it pops up and all of a sudden you don't know what to do. So I'm actually interested in this one because we have this question a lot from the agents. So I'll turn it over to Paul right now. Thanks, Paul.
All right. Thanks, Danny. Yeah, so I want to do this in two parts to kind of break down two different scenarios. So the first part, I'm going to talk about how we can avoid probate. So the goal here is somebody passed away, their heirs want to sell property. You guys want to list that property, or maybe have a buyer who wants to buy that property. We want to close that property and everybody wants to move on. Sometimes if a probate is necessary, which we'll talk about in part two, how to deal with that, then it's a whole different procedure through the courts. It could slow down the closing. So obviously you're not expected to be legal experts on the matter, but I think it is important, one thing to know when you're taking a listing, for example, if somebody who was on title is now deceased, it's important to look at the title to the property and how they held that title. So did they hold it as joint tenants with rights of survivorship? That's easy. That means all we're going to need is tell your clients, you're going to need a copy of the death certificate of the person who's deceased at closing. We file that, we record it, and simple closing, doesn't really delay anything. If they held with a ladybird deed, which we talked about in other Title Tuesdays, then that also eliminates the need for probate. It's going to go automatically to whoever they listed. Hopefully the ladybird deed was done correctly, because I do see them sometimes where they're legally deficient in the language that it needs to have, and that's not a pleasant conversation to have with somebody and say, hey, you did this, but somebody screwed it up, or you did it online by yourself, Googling it, and you didn't include this, so we unfortunately have to go through probate. That happens. Yeah. If the title is held as tenants in common or tenants by entirety, then there's going to be a probate needed, because what happens in those scenarios is Danny and I, let's say you and I own property together. I pass away, and if we have it as tenants in common, my half goes to my heirs, you keep your half. Joint tenants, everything will go to you if we were doing it that way. So now my heirs, we have to probate my half of it to go through the court system and do that. So why am I telling you this? Because it's better when you're taking the listing to know this and plan for it and advise your clients. You can still take the listing, but especially now, I know things get listed and they're sold a day later. So you don't want it to be a scenario where somebody's asking me a week after you signed the contract and title came back, and there's requirements for probate, if probate is needed, and then we have to go and do that. You want to do that ahead of time. So that's kind of getting ahead of the game. There are going to be times when it's not avoidable, just the way it is, things are set up. It doesn't matter if the people had a will or didn't have a will. If you have a will, all it means is you still have to go through probate. That's the most common misconception. People think, well, I don't have to go through probate, I had a will. The will says when I die, my daughter can do whatever she wants with the property. That is true. Your daughter will be able to do whatever she wants with the property, but it still needs to go through the courts to enforce the will and admit it into the probate. So it's not, that's a very common misconception, is that your heirs are going to avoid it if you have a will. So those are just a few of the things important to know when you're taking the listing. And then I want to talk next time about when it happens. It's going to happen when you're going to run into a closing where maybe somebody died 10 years ago and everyone else has just been living there. Now they go to sell it. They didn't even ever think of doing probate. But the way the title was held either doesn't specify how they're going to hold it, or was tenants in common, and now you need to go through probate. So as an agent, how do you deal with that? What are the timelines on it? And how do you try to expedite your closing and keep your buyer and keep your sellers happy?
Do you see that occasionally too?
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah, it happens. Yeah, there's been times, to be honest, that obviously we don't know. We get a contract. We're most of the time we're handling for the buyer, and then sometimes we're dealing even with an attorney for the seller, and the attorney and the seller doesn't know that one of the sellers is deceased. So we find out, a week before the closing, and it's like, what do you mean? Yeah, they passed away last year. They didn't tell me. And so then all of a sudden
Right.
it becomes a scramble. Closing is delayed. In those cases, it's frustrating because you might have a buyer who's done inspections, paid for appraisals, gone through the headache of the whole process, and it's now at the finish line only to find out that they can't get clear title because of process is needed.
Right. Well, good stuff, man. This is once again, this is part one. There's going to be a part two in 2 weeks. So thanks, Paul. Anything else you might want to add before we take off today? We got a busy day, I know.
Yeah, we do have a busy day, and we appreciate that. I mean, getting a lot of support from the agents all over, and we really appreciate that. We hope everyone's having a good experience, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help. Helped a lot of you with questions, and keep them coming. Keep the closings coming.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to Title Tuesday, and we'll see you for part two in about 2 weeks. Paul, take care, and everybody else take care together moving forward.
Thank you.